The late autumn sun hung low over Washington, D.C., casting long shadows across the Capitol dome. It was one of those deceptively calm days in the city, quiet on the surface, but beneath it, political energy flickered like lightning waiting to strike. America was watching closely as Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed Al Salman arrived in the United States for a high-stakes diplomatic visit with President Donald J. Trump. The agenda was powerful, controversial, and globally significant. Energy security, counter-terror alliances, Middle East stabilization, and a new economic corridor connecting several allied nations. But before Air Force One could even taxi out to meet the Crown Prince's arrival, one voice had already ignited a national firestorm. Bernie Sanders, the fiery and outspoken senator from Vermont, stood before a cluster of cameras on the Capitol steps, his signature hair tousled by the cold wind, his voice brimming with indignation. "This visit," Sanders declared, stabbing a finger in the air, "is nothing short of a disgrace. President Trump rolling out the red carpet for a leader responsible for human rights abuses is not what American values stand for." A dozen microphones jumped closer. Reporters scribbled furiously. Social media lit up instantly. Sanders wasn't just criticizing the visit, he was launching a full-scale attack on President Trump's foreign policy, accusing him of embracing authoritarianism, abandoning American moral leadership, and bowing to petrostate interests. Inside the White House, the reaction was immediate. Carolyn Leavitt, the confident and razor-sharp White House press secretary, walked briskly through the West Wing halls balancing briefing folders. Staffers rushed alongside her, updating her in real time. "Bernie's comments are everywhere," one aide said breathlessly. "It's dominating Twitter, YouTube, cable news. Everyone's running wall-to-wall coverage." Carolyn paused, exhaled, and pushed open the door to the Oval Office. President Trump sat behind the resolute desk reading through the final intelligence brief on the diplomatic summit. Without looking up, he spoke in that blunt, unmistakable tone. "Let me guess. Bernie's yelling again?" Carolyn nodded. "On every screen." Trump finally looked up, smirking. "Good. That means he's nervous." The president's confidence contrasted sharply with the chaos unfolding on the outside. Headlines were multiplying. Bernie Sanders blasts Trump over Saudi visit. Sanders, this is not who we are. Diplomatic firestorm as Sanders attacks Trump MBS meeting. Cable news networks held live panels debating Sanders' accusations. Progressive commentators echoed his outrage. Conservative pundits mocked the theatrics. But what no one yet knew, what no one in the media, the Senate, or even Sanders himself realized, was that Trump's diplomatic agenda involved a classified component so groundbreaking that once revealed, it would flip the entire national conversation on its head. For now, though, America saw only the clash. Bernie Sanders, the moral crusader, versus Donald Trump, the unapologetic dealmaker. Inside the Capitol, Sanders continued his tirade. He pounded the podium, railing against the administration's openness to Saudi partnerships. The crowd of journalists grew. "Let me be absolutely clear," Sanders thundered. "This administration has abandoned the core principles of American democracy. This is dangerous. This is reckless. This is not foreign policy. It's foreign obedience." He was fired up, and he believed he had won the narrative. But at that very moment, across the river at Joint Base Andrews, President Trump was standing on the tarmac greeting the Crown Prince. Cameras flashed as they shook hands firmly, a sign of strength, not submission. "Let's make history today," Trump told MBS. "We will," the Crown Prince replied with quiet confidence. And indeed, history was about to be made, just not in the way Bernie Sanders thought. Because Trump was about to unveil a diplomatic masterstroke, one that would leave Sanders stunned, the media scrambling, and Washington spinning. Inside the White House, the atmosphere was thick with anticipation. What Bernie Sanders didn't know, what no one outside Trump's inner diplomatic circle knew, was that this meeting with Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed Al Salman was not just a symbolic gesture. It was a geopolitical pivot, one that had been in the making for months and held the potential to reshape the Middle East and America's global standing at once. Carolyn Leavitt briefed the press, carefully offering general statements but holding back the most explosive details. The press corps fired questions rapidly. Is this visit a signal that President Trump is abandoning human rights concerns? Will the administration respond to Senator Sanders' accusations? Is this meeting about oil, about arms, about security? Is Bernie Sanders correct that the White House is compromising American values? Carolyn flashed a diplomatic smile, measured, unbothered, almost amused. Ladies and gentlemen, I assure you, you will understand everything soon. And when you do, many of the narratives out there will look very, very foolish. Reporters exchanged glances. Something was happening. Meanwhile, inside the Situation Room, President Trump, MBS, Secretary of State Pompeo, military strategists, and key national security advisors gathered around a circular table. Maps, satellite images, and coded briefings were projected on the large screen. Trump leaned back in his chair and clasped his hands. Bernie wants to lecture me about foreign policy, he said with a shrug, but he has no idea what's coming. This is bigger than politics. It's bigger than the campaigns. This is about creating stability in a region that's been burning for decades. Pompeo nodded. The moment Sanders speaks, the media follows, but once this is public, they'll have to rewrite everything. MBS spoke calmly, his tone steady but decisive. Our nations have a difficult history, but our future depends on partnership, not hostility. The extremists who want chaos will hate today. That is why we must move. Trump pointed to the screen, an intelligent satellite map of Iran's latest nuclear enrichment acceleration. The room straightened. This is what Bernie doesn't see, Trump said. We're not meeting for photo ops. We're building an alliance to stop a catastrophe. The classified plan, known internally as Operation Desert Shield 2.0, was a joint counter-terror, cyber defense, and energy stabilization pact involving the U.S., Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Jordan, and the UAE. But the most controversial piece was something radical, a proposed historic normalization framework between Saudi Arabia and Israel. This was the bombshell. This was why Bernie Sanders was lashing out. This was why Trump was keeping quiet until the moment was right. Back at the Capitol, Sanders was celebrating his media moment. Progressive commentators hailed him as the moral compass of the Senate. Activists reposted his speech millions of times. On talk shows, he received applause. This administration is eroding American values, he insisted in one interview. I will not stand by while this president embraces authoritarianism. But behind the scenes, cracks were forming. International diplomats were puzzled by Sanders' aggression. Several senators privately urged him to slow down until details of the visit emerged. Intelligence officials hinted, carefully, that Sanders might be reacting prematurely. But Bernie was immovable. He believed the narrative belonged to him. Until the White House announced a surprise primetime address from President Trump. Cable news exploded. Why is the president addressing the nation tonight? Is this related to the Saudi visit? Is Trump responding to Senator Sanders? Bernie Sanders watched from his Senate office, arms crossed, confident that Trump was scrambling to do damage control. But what came next would flip his world upside down. At exactly 8 p.m. EST, every major network cut to the Oval Office. President Donald J. Trump sat behind the resolute desk, posture firm, hands folded. My fellow Americans, there has been a lot of noise today. A lot of shouting, a lot of political theater. But what happened in Washington today is not about politics. It's about the future of global peace. He paused, and then delivered the blow Bernie never saw coming. Today, the United States has brokered the first ever framework for diplomatic normalization between Saudi Arabia and Israel. The nation recoiled in shock. And this agreement includes commitments to reduce terrorism, stabilize the region, and strengthen American energy independence, not weaken it. Bernie Sanders stared at the screen, eyes widening. Trump wasn't cozying up to authoritarianism. He was orchestrating one of the biggest diplomatic shifts in modern history. And to those who criticize this meeting without knowing a single fact, Trump added, leaning in slightly, I would advise them to be patient before embarrassing themselves. Bernie's face flushed. This was only the beginning. Bernie Sanders sat frozen in his office, the glow of the television turning his expression pale. The news anchors were scrambling to interpret the development Trump had just dropped on the nation. Social media was melting down with shock, confusion, and praise. Even some liberal commentators, normally ready to pounce on the president, were cautiously acknowledging, this is significant. This could reshape the Middle East. No one saw this coming. Bernie's aides looked at him nervously. Senator, should we release a statement? Sanders rubbed his forehead, pacing rapidly around the room like a storm contained within four walls. His earlier confidence was gone. Now he appeared cornered, desperate to regain control of the narrative. We need to respond, Sanders snapped. People think Trump is some kind of peace negotiator now. We can't let that stand. But, Senator, an aide said timidly, the normalization framework, this is something Democrats have been advocating for decades. Bernie spun around. I know what it is, but Trump cannot be allowed to take credit for anything historic. The aide swallowed. Sir, everyone is praising the diplomatic breakthrough. Even European leaders are reacting positively. If we attack it, it might what? Bernie barked. Make me look unreasonable? I don't care how it looks. Trump cannot be allowed to look like a statesman. The room fell silent. The aides exchanged worried glances. Sanders marched to the podium outside his office. Dozens of reporters swarmed around him, lights flashing, microphones thrust forward. Senator Sanders, do you have a response to the president's announcement? Were your earlier criticisms premature? Do you regret attacking the president before knowing the details? Bernie tightened his jaw. He had no intention of backing down. This so-called agreement, he began sharply, is nothing but political theater. It's not binding, it's not enforceable, and it's a distraction from the president's failures. Let me be clear. Trump is trying to score political points, not pursue peace. The reporters murmured. The tone wasn't landing well. Sanders pushed harder. This visit is still a disgrace. The Crown Prince has a terrible human rights record. A handshake with Donald Trump doesn't erase that. One reporter raised an eyebrow. But Senator, the normalization framework could reduce regional tensions, strengthen global security, and build new trade pathways. Doesn't that count for something? Bernie's face tightened. This administration cannot be trusted. The press conference ended awkwardly. Within minutes, political commentators were dissecting Bernie's meltdown. Sanders looks rattled. He attacked too early. He didn't anticipate Trump would pull off something this big. Meanwhile, at the White House, President Trump watched the clips with a grin. I told you Bernie would lose it. He thought he had me cornered. Now look, he's screaming at reporters. Caroline Leavitt nodded. He's floundering. Even his allies don't know how to defend his statements. Trump stood up, adjusting his tie. Let's finish this. Moments later, he walked into the White House press briefing room. The crowd erupted with questions, hands shooting into the air. Trump raised one hand. Sit. Relax. I'll answer everything. The room quieted. I heard Senator Sanders' comments, Trump began, amusement visible in his eyes. He attacked my meeting this morning. He attacked the idea of diplomacy. And he attacked me personally before knowing a single detail. Turns out his entire rant was based on zero facts. A ripple of laughter moved through the room. And now that the facts are out, he looks like a guy who started yelling before the referee even blew the whistle. The press chuckled. Trump continued, more serious now. Foreign policy isn't about shouting the loudest. It's about making the smartest moves. And today, we made a very smart move. Back at the Capitol, Sanders watched the clip and slammed his fist on his desk. Why does he always get away with this? He roared. His aides said nothing. They knew the truth. Trump didn't just make Bernie's earlier attack look foolish. He had completely reversed the national conversation. Washington was buzzing like a hive struck with a stick. News networks had dispatched analysts, Middle East experts, and former diplomats to dissect Trump's surprise announcement.
Every corner of the city, from think tanks to coffee shops to Senate hallways, was consumed by the same question. How did Trump pull this off? For years, every administration, both Republican and Democrat, had quietly admitted that normalization between Saudi Arabia and Israel was the holy grail of Middle Eastern diplomacy. Many tried, all failed. Yet Trump, in his second term, somehow cracked the code. And Bernie Sanders, after launching a preemptive attack, now found himself at the center of ridicule. On late-night TV, comedians joked about his historic misfire. Pundits questioned whether he had jumped the gun out of political desperation. Even some progressive voters murmured online, Bernie kind of messed this one up. He went too hard before knowing anything. He looks unhinged. But none of them knew the full story. Not yet. Because Trump had kept one final detail hidden, one that would make Bernie's attacks not just premature, but dangerously misinformed. The next morning, Trump convened another high-level meeting. Carolyn Leavitt, Secretary Pompeo, Defense Secretary Milley, cybersecurity experts, and intelligence chiefs filled the room. Trump tapped a folder. "We're releasing the classified component today. Let's end this nonsense once and for all." Caroline arched an eyebrow. "You're sure, sir? This is massive." Trump grinned. "Exactly." The classified section of the Saudi-Israel-US agreement wasn't about oil. It wasn't about weapons. It wasn't even about diplomacy. It was about countering Chinese covert expansion in the Middle East. The agreement included a secret trilateral cyber defense initiative designed to block Chinese infiltration of American and Middle Eastern energy grids. Intelligence had revealed multiple attempts by Chinese hackers to gain control of critical infrastructure. If successful, the U.S. could have faced a blackout-level crisis. Saudi Arabia and Israel had quietly alerted the U.S. Trump had quietly built an alliance, and now, for the first time ever, these three nations had formed a joint cybersecurity defense shield, one that would lock out Beijing's cyber warfare programs for decades. Pompeo leaned forward. "Once this is out, every critic is going to look reckless." Trump nodded, "Especially Bernie." Meanwhile, in the Senate, Bernie Sanders was struggling to contain the growing backlash. His staff tried to steady the ship, but the pressure was overwhelming. "Senator, CNN wants to know if you spoke too soon." "Senator, donors are asking for clarification." "Senator, half the caucus thinks you're undermining diplomacy." Bernie was livid. "I will not back down," he shouted. "Trump is dangerous. His foreign policy is reckless." His legislative aide cut him off, trembling. "Sir, with respect, the classified section of the deal is about protecting the U.S. from Chinese cyber attacks." Bernie blinked. "What?" "It's about national security, Senator. Cyber warfare, energy grid protection, peacekeeping. It's actually a good thing." Bernie's jaw dropped. For the first time since this saga began, Bernie Sanders was speechless. At 3 p.m., Caroline Leavitt walked to the press briefing room podium. Her tone was sharp, her posture unshakable. Earlier this week, Senator Sanders made serious accusations about the president's meeting with the Saudi crown prince. He claimed it was reckless, dangerous, undemocratic. She paused, letting the words settle like dust in a silent room. But here is the truth. She clicked a button. A screen behind her displayed a map of U.S. electrical grids, communications networks, and hacked infrastructure attempts tied to China. The president's meeting was to finalize a trilateral security initiative that prevents China from compromising America's energy grid. The room gasped. This agreement will protect millions of American homes, hospitals, military bases, and essential infrastructure. It is one of the largest cyber defense achievements in U.S. history, and Senator Sanders attacked it without knowing anything about it. Caroline Leavitt leaned forward, delivering the final blow. Maybe next time, Senator Sanders should learn the facts before trying to score political points. Back in the Senate, Sanders slumped into a chair, exhausted. His phone buzzed nonstop. Messages, criticisms, news alerts. He turned on the TV. Every network was replaying Carolyn's briefing. And every headline was devastating. Sanders backfires. Attacked Trump's national security achievement. Bernie's blunder. Misjudged historic deal. Sanders regrets premature attack, sources say. Bernie closed his eyes. For the first time,
the storm in Washington had reached its peak. Reporters filled every hallway of Capitol Hill. Every network chyron screamed variations of the same narrative. Sanders wrong about Trump's Saudi visit. White House reveals massive security deal. Bernie under fire for misjudging president's strategic breakthrough. Washington sharks were circling. This wasn't just a bad moment for Bernie Sanders. This was the kind of blunder that carved itself into political history. And Donald Trump wasn't done tightening the screws. The next morning, Trump announced a live address from the Rose Garden. The media flocked toward the White House like moths drawn to a floodlight. There was electricity in the air. This was going to be big. Trump walked out with commanding calm, flanked by Secretary Pompeo, Caroline Leavitt, and a group of cybersecurity and intelligence officials. The backdrop was deliberate: American flags, crisp autumn air, and sunlight illuminating the podium. He gripped the sides of the lectern. Yesterday, you learned about the cyber defense component of the deal we struck with Saudi Arabia and Israel. Today, you're going to learn why it matters. He paused just long enough to build suspense. For the past year, China has been trying to infiltrate U.S. energy grids. Not everyone in Washington knew this. In fact, many of the people criticizing this deal were completely unaware. There it was. A quiet punch directed at Bernie Sanders without saying his name. Trump continued. Saudi Arabia and Israel provided crucial intelligence. Working together, we created a defensive alliance that protects American infrastructure. This meeting wasn't about politics. It was about the security of every American family, farm, business, and military base. Camera shutters flickered, and anyone who attacked this meeting without knowing the facts, Trump said, leaning slightly toward the microphone, should take a long, hard look at their judgment. Across the city, Bernie Sanders watched, face pale, lips pressed tightly. He didn't need Trump to say his name. Everyone knew exactly who Trump meant. But Trump wasn't done. Caroline Leavitt stepped forward with a tablet in hand. She announced, "We are releasing declassified evidence of cyber intrusion attempts." Screens lit up behind her, displaying maps of attempted grid infiltrations, traces of coordinated attacks tied to China, evidence that Saudi and Israeli intelligence blocked them, notes showing the timeline, including how close China came to breaching U.S. power infrastructure. One journalist gasped audibly. Another whispered, "This is massive." Caroline's voice was icy, controlled. Let the record show, Senator Sanders called this meeting reckless and dangerous before knowing anything about it. Then she delivered the kill shot. And had the president listened to Senator Sanders, America would be more vulnerable today. The press room erupted. The story went nuclear. By noon, Bernie Sanders had no choice. He stepped out of his Senate office, shoulders stiff, eyes shadowed with exhaustion. A swarm of reporters descended on him. "Senator, do you regret your earlier comments? Were you wrong about the president's meeting? Do you apologize for misjudging the diplomatic visit?" Bernie lifted the microphone with shaky hands.
"I stand by my concerns," he began, but his voice lacked conviction. "The classified portion changes the nature of the situation." The reporters closed in tighter. "So you were wrong." Bernie opened his mouth to speak and then closed it. There was no answer that wouldn't make him look worse. His silence told the whole nation, yes, he was wrong, completely. The clip went viral in minutes. Millions watched Bernie's moment of defeat, his inability to defend himself, his collapse under the weight of Trump's revelation. That evening, Trump hosted a nationally televised town hall. Energy experts, diplomats, and security analysts praised the agreement as one of the most significant tri-nation security alliances in decades. A college student asked, "Mr. President, what would you say to people who criticize the meeting before knowing the facts?" Trump smiled. "I'd say, don't rush to judgment, especially if you're a senator." The audience burst into laughter. Then he delivered the line that would headline every newspaper in America. "Bernie Sanders attacked me in the morning, and by the evening, the entire world saw that he had no idea what he was talking about." The crowd roared. Trump continued, "This deal protects America, strengthens our allies, and builds a future of cooperation, not chaos. We did something historic, and sometimes historic things make people uncomfortable." That night, long after the cameras turned off, Bernie Sanders walked slowly down a dim Senate hallway with only one aide beside him. "Senator, are you all right?" the aide asked softly. Bernie didn't answer. For the first time in his long political career, he felt completely outmaneuvered. Trump had played the long game, patient, quiet, strategic. Bernie had reacted emotionally, loudly, prematurely, and the nation had seen it all. He stopped at the window overlooking the Capitol grounds. The city lights glowed below. He exhaled deeply, almost trembling. "I should have waited," he whispered. It was the closest he would ever come to admitting regret. Back at the White House, Trump stood in the Oval Office with Pompeo and Caroline. Caroline asked, "Do you think Sanders will keep attacking you?" Trump smirked. "Probably, that's what he does. But this time, nobody's listening." He turned toward the window, hands clasped behind his back. "Some people yell. Some people accomplish things," he said, his reflection staring back at him from the glass, steady, victorious, unbothered. "And today," Trump added quietly, "America won."